Mirdita, and hello, and welcome to International Cooking. I'm your host today, Roy Davis, and I'm the host with the most because not only do I cook, I'm an engineer. And one of the things that I like doing is cooking as a hobby, and I would like to thank the Tring Network for bringing me onto the show to share some of my wonderful recipes that I have that I bring from the United States. And I'm going to share a lot more with you throughout the coming episodes. And today, we're going to be talking about the Chicago-style beef sandwich. Now, a Chicago-style beef sandwich is very similar to the Albanian souflage. Now, the Albanian souflage is made with many different things. It's made with chicken, it's made with pork, but the one thing I've never seen a souflage in Albania is made with beef. So, today, whereas in the previous episodes, this being our 4th edition, I introduced you to the American meatloaf, I introduced you to some New Orleans-style jambalaya. Today we're going to go to Chicago, the home and Jake and Elwood Blues, the Blues Brothers. Now, I'm sure that somewhere along his lines, when he was working at Second City in Chicago, I'm sure that John Belushi probably after a show walked down the street to get a Chicago-style beef sandwich. And this is what we are going to show you how to do here today. Now we're going to get to the recipe. Chicago-style beef is made up of grade A ground beef, chuck beef, chuck roast. It's a little bit hard here in Albania to how to talk to you to tell you how to exactly look for it. But I'm going to show it to you here today. So everything will be visual, hands-on, and you'll see it. So Chicago-style beef is created with a roasted beef, which we're going to roast, and during the roasting period, we're going to create some toppings for it, and then we're going to serve up some roast beef sandwiches. Why don't we get started here? So I'm going to go over here to my refrigerator, and I'm going to pull out my beef. Now, the recipe calls for about a kilo and a half, 1.5 kilograms of grade A, which is what we call it in the United States, grade A round roast beef. And what that means is that grade A beef is a beef that is very low in fat. And the first thing that you want to look for when you go looking for your beef is you want to make sure that you find a piece of beef that has very little fat on it, because what you need to do during the process of seasoning and cooking, you'll have to trim a lot of that fat off because we don't want that fat inside of our dish. So, as you can see here on our beef, we have this here is at 3/4 of a kilogram. For the purposes of the show, we cut the size of this in half, and this is a little bit of a long recipe. So I'm going to show you how to make it, and I'm going to show you how you can take it and you can put it inside the refrigerator, and you can keep it for days, weeks, or months, and then pull it out and make it when you want it. Okay? So with this piece of beef, it's about 3/4 of a kilogram, and you can see that it's very lean. Now, it does have some nice marbling going on here, some white marbling, but any type of beef that might have the fat hanging off the side of it, you want to definitely cut that off of the beef. You don't want that on the beef, okay? Because the beef, the fat gives it wonderful flavor, but when you eat it, it becomes a little bit chewy, so we don't want chewy. So, we have our beef out here. We're going to start with our seasonings. To make our seasonings, to season this up, we're going to start with a bowl, okay? And we're going to use about 2 teaspoons of oregano. Now I'm going to show you, I already pre-measured these, and this is about 2 teaspoons of oregano, as you can see, okay? And then we're going to start with our next seasoning. We're going to use basil. And we're going to take our basil and put it in there. And again, you can see it's about 2 teaspoons, okay? Now that you see that I've measured everything out, I'm going to just jump to the gun here. We're also going to use about 1 teaspoon of onion powder. Now again, I think in previous episodes I've mentioned that onion powder isn't hard to find here. Lots of times you can find onion slices, onion slivers, and dried onion. This is good too. You can also use this. The next thing we're going to do is 2 tablespoons of granulated garlic, okay? So we're gonna get our garlic in there. Our next seasoning is gonna be 1 teaspoon of black pepper. And just to finish it off, we're just gonna put a pinch of salt, okay? So there we got our pinch of salt, okay? I put 2 pinches. So now that I got that in there, I'm gonna take a fork here and I'm just gonna kind of mix those seasonings until they're just kind of really mixed up. It doesn't have to be perfect because all the seasonings are all gonna get under the beef itself, so all you gotta be worried about is that it's kind of mixed. Okay, this is our seasoning. Simple, easy, and everything you can get here in Albania. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna take our seasonings and we're gonna sprinkle a very thick layer of seasonings over our beef. Okay? And I'm going to tell you a couple of little alternative ways to do this. This is the easiest way with the dry mixes. Now once we have this on here, we want to massage the seasonings into the beef. So we want to get this and push it into our beef. Now we're going to coat both sides of the beef. I'm just showing you the first side. Okay? Now the reason why we're pushing these seasonings into the beef here is because basically you want to infuse all of these flavors into the beef. You want to get these flavors deep, deep, deep down into the beef. You just don't want to taste it on top, you want to taste it all the way through. Okay? I'm going to continue adding a little bit more here. Now if it looks like it's a little bit too much seasonings, don't be afraid. It's not really a lot of seasonings because in the second part of the cooking process, the seasonings are actually going to fall off and drip off into the juices of the gravy that we're going to make for it. Okay, there's our first side. We're going to do our second side. Now, the combination and amount of seasonings that we're using here is formulated to just make a little bit on the top and the bottom, and we're going to have some seasonings left over that we're going to use in the water in our pan. Okay? Now, Chicago-style beef originally was, there's a lot of controversy about Chicago-style beef. We know for sure that it originated in Chicago in the mid-1930s. One of the men who started a restaurant in 1938 is a gentleman called Al, and he owns Al's Beef in Chicago. Now, Al's Beef is an incredibly worldwide famous beef house, and he makes the Chicago-style beef sandwiches. Whereas you can go all over Chicago and get Chicago-style beef, Al's is the place you want to go if you've never been to Chicago before and you want to go get an authentic style beef. Al, when he opened up his restaurant in the late 1930s, he kind of claims himself that he was the originator of the beef. But there's controversy behind it because basically there's lots of people who did this beef before Al did. People that in the early 1900s, Italian immigrants, they used to work in the stockyards. The stockyards are like your cattle yards here in Albania, in Chicago. And the stockyards in Chicago, the people who worked there, they used to be able to bring meats home to their families. And these meats that they brought home to their families were the rough and the tough and the hard types of meat that was cheap in price, and the pieces of meat that were left over that didn't go to the butchers. So these Italian immigrants learned of a way to cook the beef by roasting it for a very long time in pots and grills and all different types of cooking methods to get the beef soft. Now, the ingredients for the beef, which may seem slightly Italian, is really pretty much authentic Chicago because these are the things they had available at that time. I can tell you right now that there's not a single person in Chicago that could tell you these stories because they've heard a different story themselves. But if I had to go back myself, I would actually say that it was the early immigrant Italians that actually brought this style of cooking to Chicago. And Chicago, being the second largest population of Polish people outside of Warsaw, And the third largest is Italian, so it has a very large Italian influence. Okay, now we got our beef all pressed in here. We're going to take the beef and we're going to just set it aside. Okay? Now, at this state of the recipe, the first thing you need to do is let it set for about 30 minutes in open air. Okay? Now, the preparation time for the next step allows this to breathe in the open air and all of those seasonings start to infuse with the beef. So let's get to our next step of our recipe. Okay, we're going to get our roasting pan here. And the roasting pan, you can use any kind of roasting pan. This is just one that I have at home. I actually brought this from my home today. And you can buy this in numerous places here in Toronto or around Albania. This is the typical way you would make it in this type of roasting pan with a metal rack that rests above the pan, okay, and you put your liquids under it. And this is one of the ways that you would typically make it in the States. So we're going to set this aside a second. We're going to turn on our eye here. We can get it to come on. Okay, and we're going to turn it on low. This step, before we put it inside the oven, this step is to heat up our water. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cover the bottom of the pan with about 2 centimeters of water. Now, the real recipe for 1.5 kilograms actually calls for 6 cups of water. And this recipe is actually designed to work very, very well in this style pan. And the way this works is that we're going to our next step is we're going to put some bouillon in here. And we use beef bouillon, okay? This is one of the key ingredients to this recipe. And we're going to put about 3 good tablespoons of bouillon. Now typically that seems like a lot, but this is a very, very rich gravy. Now in Chicago we call this gravy. It's really just a water sauce, but we call it gravy. And if you call it anything other than gravy in Chicago, they'll kick you out of the beef place. So we're going to take this and we're going to dissolve this over a little bit of water, and we're just going to heat it up to about lukewarm until the bouillon starts to mix in. Once the bouillon starts to mix in, we're going to take the remaining of our spices that we didn't use, and we reserved our spices, and add it to this. Now, this is going to go a little bit fast here on the show. So the one thing you want to do at this step, you can do this step and set this aside and let it sit for 30 minutes, but you definitely have to let the beef rest for 30 minutes to let those infuse. Okay, now this here only takes, we're going to try and speed it up just a tiny bit faster here. This only takes a couple of minutes to dissolve. And you just want to kind of keep stirring it to get those chunks and lumps out of it, because you don't want all these big chunks in it. Okay. Okay. Now, they're starting to dissolve now under the heat, and I'm going to go ahead and finish adding my dry mixture and stir it in. Now, you're not cooking the sauce at this point. All you're doing is warming it up to make the beef bouillon granules break down inside the water so that it doesn't stick once you put it in the oven. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, this step here is crucial with this. You can set this aside once this has already condensed down. But after about 30 minutes, we're going to jump ahead here. After about 30 minutes of letting your beef rest, we're going to put our rack back on our glass bowl here, okay? And we're going to take our beef and we're going to lay it right above the water on the rack. And as you can see there, the water comes right to the bottom of the rack, okay? And we're going to let this sit just like there, just like that. Now what's going to happen when we put this in the oven is that all of the beef juices and fats are going to drip down off of the beef into the water, the gravy mixture, and it's going to fuse to make the flavor that we're looking for to get Italian beef. And that's the secret to Italian beef, the gravy. It's the right gravy. Now, those two actual secrets, we don't get to the second secret until a little bit later on. But the first secret is getting the gravy just right. So, now that we've got our gravy ready, and we've got our pan ready, and our meat on it, we're going to take it, and we're going to put it in our oven. Now, you have to preheat your oven. You don't want to put this in with the oven cold. You want to preheat your oven to 205 degrees C, okay, which I've already done, and it's nice and warm. And we're going to take our dish and put it right here into our oven, okay? Now, when this is cooking in the oven, it's very important to keep an eye on the level of the water, because the gravy, the juice in the bottom of the pan, is what really makes the dish. So if you have an oven that you're operating at 200 degrees C, you want to be sure that you, throughout the process, you want to keep your eye on it. Now, typically, you want to bake your beef about 30 minutes per pound. And that actually breaks down to about 30 minutes per, say, a half a kilo, okay? So in this instance, it should be about 45 minutes to an hour. So we're gonna let this cook for 45 minutes to an hour, and we're gonna keep our eye on it. We're gonna watch it. You don't wanna walk away from it, okay? If the water starts to evaporate inside, you're gonna want to add a little bit more water to it, because you wanna keep the water right up to the level of the bottom of the rack. Very important in this stage of the process. Now, since that's going to be off cooking, we're going to do our next recipe that's going to go along with this. Now, the typical recipe, and it's really not a recipe, it's just the basic standard French fry. We in America eat a lot of French fries, and there's nothing you can't go to a restaurant and buy and not get a side of French fries. For this particular show, I'm choosing not to do French fries, because we're not buying this at a fast food restaurant. We're making this at home, right? Just like you're gonna do. So French fries is probably more fun and more fun to buy out than make at home. So I'm going to make a side of cold American potato salad. Now, in recent episodes, I made some mashed potatoes, some garlic Parmesan mashed potatoes, and I've also made some American-style pasta salad, so macaroni salad. So this episode, we're going to show you how to make American-style potato salad. And the first thing we need to do is to get a pot for our potatoes. Okay, we're going to get it on the stove here. And I'm going to use 6 medium to large size potatoes, okay? And we're going to chop these up and get them into our pot. Now, the secret to making a really good potato salad is to not overcook your potatoes. Because if you overcook your potatoes, you're going to turn it into mashed potatoes. And the size of the potatoes is important too, because the size of the potatoes determines how long you're going to leave them in the pot. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to make basically a couple of cuts, about 4 down the center and 4 that way, okay? And we might want to cut this one up too. And then we're just going to cut it in 2 places. We're going to cut them here, cut them there, and that's about the size of the potatoes we want for our potato salad. Now, the reason why we make the chunks a little bit large is because during the cooking process, they are going to get a little bit tiny mushy, and when you mix them in your bowl with the other ingredients, they tend to break apart. So we make chunky potato salad, so it's important to make your size of your potatoes a little bit larger than you would for, say, cutting up for making a mashed potato. So I'm going to put my first potato in my pot here, okay? And we're going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'll show you the ingredients for this. So, in a few moments, we'll be right back. Hello, we're back, and we've got our potatoes all cut up here, and we're going to get them in our pot. Now again, we're using 6 medium to large sized potatoes for this potato salad, okay? And that's just about the right size for a family of 4, or if you're a family of 2, you have it for 1 or 2 days. Potato salad goes great, wonderful in the refrigerator. You can keep it in the refrigerator for up for a couple of days. So we're going to cover our potatoes here with our water, okay? And we're going to get it going here, okay? There we go. Now, while we got our potatoes going there, we're going to add a little bit of salt. Now, we add a pinch of salt because we want to try and pull out that starch, okay? The starch that's in the potatoes. We don't want the starch in the potatoes, and the salt helps pull it out a little bit, and it also helps to not let the potatoes stick together. So always add a little pinch of salt. If you're very health conscious about it and you don't eat salt at all, it's all right. Just you have to keep an eye on your potatoes so that they don't stick together, and you got to keep stirring them little by little. This way you can walk away from it and go to your next step in your recipe. So we've got our potatoes for our American potato salad working on the stove. Now we're going to go for a moment, and we're going to jump back to our Chicago-style beef recipe, and we're going to create our topping for the recipe. First thing we're going to need is we're going to need a saute pan. Okay. Now there are many different types of toppings for the Chicago-style beef sandwich. One of the most common style toppings for a sandwich is called jordanaire. And also for the purposes of this show, jordanaire is a very hot vinegarized sauce that's made with all kinds of vegetables mixed in, but it is an incredibly hot mixture. Not temperature hot, but tongue hot. And it is very much a Chicago-style staple on the beef sandwich. In fact, people make jordanaire special at home just for their beef sandwiches. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm considering doing that in a future episode to show you how you make jordanaire and what the correct process is. It takes about 2 days to make jordanaire, and it's a little bit hard to get into a whole 60-minute show. So maybe we'll do that a little bit later. The next best topping for an Italian beef sandwich from Chicago is the green pepper, okay? Now, sweet green peppers are the best because the sweet green bell peppers, they add a little bit of sweetness to the beef when you place it on as a topping. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our peppers here, okay? We're going to clean out our peppers. And we're going to get these seeds out. We're going to devein our pepper slightly, okay? And get our seeds out. Okay. And again, if you don't know how to devein a pepper, the easiest way is to lay your knife flat and kind of push along the pepper, and it helps devein it. Now, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because the inside of the pepper is just as good as the outside. Just want to make sure you get all the seeds out of it. Okay. Oh, look at that, one little seed hiding behind there. Okay, little stubborn seed. Oh, look, there's another stubborn seed. Okay. So, now, what we're going to do here, we're going to cut our peppers into 1/4-inch strips. And a 1/4 inch, help me out here, is about 7 millimeters wide. So, we're going to do our strips here, okay? And you want to leave them long. You want them to be the full length of the pepper. And the reason why you want that is because they're supposed to be slightly stringy for a topping. And when we get to that point, you'll see what I mean by stringy. So, we're going to leave them long, okay? And for the purposes of all of the people in the studio here today, I'm going to do one more pepper. And why am I doing one more pepper as a topping? Because I think everybody in the studio is going to enjoy this today. So, we're going to open our pepper up, our second pepper, take out our seeds like we did the first. Get those stubborn seeds out, the ones that want to give you problems. Okay, and we're going to take these and put these into 1/4-inch strips. Okay, you notice I'm wearing my gloves because I was trying to stay clean here and not have my hands actually touch the beef. It's all right to get your hands in the beef and move it around, squish it around, but because of bacteria, you need to be careful. You don't want to pass the bacteria along to your, if your beef does have any bacteria on it, E. coli or such, the one thing you want to do is not pass that E. coli onto your other foods. So you want to do this when you're handling your vegetables and other foods. So there we have our peppers, okay? Now, in our saute pan here, frying pan, which I believe is called a tigan, we're going to put this on medium heat, okay? Because we're not going to, we want to cook these down slowly, okay? And what we want to do here, let's see, I need my olive oil. We're going to put about a tablespoon of olive oil in the bottom of the pan. And we're going to add our peppers to the pan. Now, what we want to see when we're sauteing these peppers is we want to get them up to a point where it's literally very soft, very limp, okay? We want to get them very soft, very limp, and actually a little blackened is not so bad either, because that little bit of blackness that comes in on them is going to punch a little bit flavor into our beef sandwich. Now, if you get your peppers inside a restaurant or a fast food place in Chicago, you're going to find that all of their peppers are limp. They're very squishy to the touch, but they're still stringy and whole. Kind of like when you fry it, when you do fried onions and you pull them out of a pan, they're kind of stringy. So that's the texture we're looking for here. Okay, while those are simmering, we're going to get to our ingredients for our potato salad. And I think our potato salad is starting to warm up here, and our potatoes are moving along. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to chop up 6 hard-boiled eggs. Now, the hard-boiled eggs, just a standard hard-boiled egg. You want to put it on the stove, cook it until it's well done. And for the American potato salad, I like to use hard-boiled eggs that literally does not have the yellow yolk in it. Now, the reason why I take the yolk out of my eggs is because the yolk is where all the cholesterol is. And if you want to be a little bit more health conscious, which we like to be, you take the yolk out of the egg and just use the egg white itself, okay? All I'm going to do is I'm going to just open up all my eggs here, just like this, okay? And then I'm going to take the eggs individually and just take out the yolks. That's all I'm going to do. I think these were pretty hard boiled because those yolks are stuck pretty good. Now, if you're not worried about your cholesterol, leave the yolk in, because the yolk puts a lot of flavor into the potato salad. My mother and father would never have taken the yolk out. But with the advancements in food science and learning everything about how we eat, how things should be healthy or not healthy, egg yolks, that egg yolk right there is filled full of artery-clogging cholesterol. So, now we've almost got our egg yolks out of our dish here, okay? We're just about done. A couple more. Now, I can tell you this. At this step at home, I have to hide these from my wife. My wife loves these things. And from what I know, most other people here love these yolks too. So when I take them out, it's like run for all. So now we have our egg whites. We're going to take our egg whites and we're going to chop them coarsely. Coarsely means not too small, not too big. And we're just going to very simply take our knife and chop them up easy, okay? Just like this. And we want to leave them, if you get too many, make sure you get all the big pieces chopped up. You want it to have your potato salad, you want to have a little bit of texture. It's important to have that texture in your potato salad. There's something about American cuisine, we like things crispy, chunky, and gooey. Lots of times we love them with sugar on top. But chunky is good for Americans. So we like to make it a little bit large. So we're going to take our egg whites here, put them in our bowl, okay? Set those aside for a moment and check on our peppers. Now, our peppers are just now starting to fizzle, okay? And typically, to get the peppers to the right state, it usually takes probably 5 or 6 minutes. If you're cooking on gas, it all depends on how high you have your heat. You don't, like I said, you want it on medium high because you don't want to overcook them. Actually, you know what? We better take a quick look at our beef to see how our water's doing. Okay, our beef looks pretty good. Our water hasn't quite started boiling yet, and it will start to boil, and you'll see some steam coming off of it because that's the evaporation in the oven. But it's still, because it hasn't started boiling and evaporating yet, it's still about the same level. But our beef is cooking along pretty good. Okie dokie. American expression, okie dokie. Okay, our next ingredient for our American potato salad is going to be olives. Now, the best type of olives to use that I like, you can use any kind of olive you want. I like to use olives with pimentos. The pimento is a little tiny pepper inside, okay? The reason why I like these the most is because they add a little bit more flavor, a different flavor, to the potato salad. Now you can use any kind of olive you want. If you want to, these are already pitted, okay? But if you want to spend the time to use some fresh olives, take the pits out of them and chop them up, that's fine too. So I'm just going to take my olives. I'm going to lay them out here on my board, okay? And I'm just going to kind of chop them up a little bit here. Now, I'm chopping these, but at home, when I have time, I would sit here and I would slice them like this. And I would do every olive so that every single olive kind of came out in kind of a round shape, you know, kind of a round shape. And then the pimento, when you mix it with your potato salad, the pimento falls out of the olive. But for the show, we're just going to chop these up here. Now, when you go to the store, you can find all different types of olives on the shelves now. All the different stores are now offering all kinds of stuffed olives. You can get stuffed olives with tuna, stuffed olives with anchovies. Any one of these, you can experiment with any one of these types of olives because they all bring their own unique flavor to the potato salad. Now, there really and truly are millions of ways to make potato salad. But the most traditional way is to use egg whites, hard-boiled eggs, olives, and the last ingredient we would add to our potato salad. And this is kind of also something that my mother used to do, and I just kind of continue the tradition. My mother liked to put celery into her potato salad. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to chop up some celery. Okay, actually, got a little bit of still stuck on my knife there. We're just going to clean off the knife a little bit here so that it's easier to work with. And we're going to chop up our celery. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick chop on this. And again, just the way you see me chopping it right here in this style, in this shape, is how you would normally leave it in a typical potato salad. Well, we don't always do things the way our parents taught us to do it. Myself, I love the taste of celery, but because my wife at home is not a very big celery person, I have to chop them up in little tiny pieces so that I can trick her into eating them. Okay, my peppers are starting to sizzle over there, so I'm going to take a look at them here. Okay. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but it's starting, the peppers are starting to brown very beautifully. Okay. And they actually are starting to wilt down, meaning they're starting to get soft. And because they're actually getting brown too quick, I'm going to see if I can turn my heat down just a little bit more. Well, that's about as low as I can go. So you don't want to brown them or blacken them too fast before they get wilted. So I want to now have to keep an eye on my peppers to make sure that they don't wilt. Okay. Now, we have our celery here prepared for our potato salad. Now, you notice that I used one stalk of celery. Well, I use one stalk of celery because I don't want to overpower the potato salad. I want the taste of celery, but I don't want the whole potato salad to taste like celery. So, we have our hard-boiled eggs, we have our celery, and we have our olives ready to go, okay? For our potato salad, we're going to leave our salt on the table. We're going to leave our pepper here. And we're going to jump to the next segment of the show in a moment. Soon as we get our peppers going and we get our peppers done, we're going to take a short break to do some TV magic. The TV magic is going to be the fact that I pre-prepared our Chicago-style beef the night before to speed up the process and so that I can continue showing you how to do the recipe. Now, Chicago-style beef really does take, to get it right and to get the taste that you're looking for, it takes at least a good 24 hours. Now, when we come back to the second part of the show and we take our short break, I'll show you why and show you how we're going to have our Chicago-style beef presented. So, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish up our potato salad and jump right into our Chicago-style beef. Be back in a moment. Hello, welcome back to International Cooking. I'm your host, Roy Davis. Today we're working on Chicago-style beef sandwiches, and right in the middle of all this, we are just about ready to pull our topping for our beef sandwiches off of the stove and set those aside because they are wilted very nicely. They have a very nice brown glaze color to them. And I'm going to take those and we're going to set those aside right now because these are ready. So we're going to take these, put these into our bowl here. Okay. Now this is going to be our topping for our Chicago-style beef. And also, at the same time, our potatoes are ready for our potato salad. So, let's get a colander here, a strainer, get our sink prepared, and we're going to drain our potatoes here in our sink. Okay. Oh, that's hot. Woo! Look how hot that is. Okay. Now that we've drained our potatoes, you can see that we're still quite hot. So, I'm going to take some cold water, and I'm going to slowly douse the potatoes to bring the temperature of the potatoes down. And the reason why we do this is because we don't want the potatoes to break up any more than they are, and if they stay warm, they're going to break up easier. I think we need another thing of water here. Another reason why you douse it in water is because with our remaining ingredients, you don't want to mix anything too hot or too cold together because then it's going to kill the taste and the flavor and how the potato salad will hold together. So, now we've got our potatoes just about drained. I'm going to test it, just feel it and see how warm they really are. Okay, we're pretty good. Now we're going to take our potatoes over here and we're going to dump them right into our pot. Okay? And you need a big pot for mixing. You want to definitely use a big bowl for mixing. Now, I'm going to set these here for a moment, let those cool down a little bit more, and while those are cooling down, we're going to get to our next step of our Italian Chicago beef recipe. So, as you can see, our recipe is in the oven. And at the moment, we are looking pretty good. I'm going to open it up. You can see all the steam coming out there. Now, I'm checking on the water, and I see that my water is starting to drop and go down. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to add a little bit more water to it because it's evaporating a little too fast. Okay, and I'm probably going to add a tiny bit more, maybe about another cup or so, because you want to keep the water level right below the beef. If it goes too far below the beef, you won't have enough of gravy to make the second part of your step in your recipe. And it's still not enough. So I guess this oven's working hard today. So we're going to add a third cup of water. Now that's a little less than a cup, but I'm bringing the water level up to, there we go. Now we got the water level back up to the top. Okay? Now our beef is almost done. And because we just added more water to it, we need to let it cook just a tiny bit longer. Even if the beef is a little underdone or a little overdone, that's fine, because it's not going to affect the recipe in any way. So, like I said, through TV magic, I've already prepared this last night, and I brought it with me today. And I'm going to tell you how we got to this point. After an hour's cooking time of your roast beef, you want to take the beef out of the oven, and you want to take the beef off of the tray, put the beef onto a nice cold plate, and then you want to take the plate and you want to put it in the coldest part of the refrigerator for 3 to 6 hours. Now, myself, I like to leave it in the refrigerator overnight. The most important thing about that is that we're going to be slicing the beef so that we can add it to this on our sandwiches and to our juice. And if you have a hot beef, it's incredibly difficult to slice. So it's incredibly important, this step of the recipe. We're going to take the beef out of the oven. We're going to take the beef off of the rack, put it on a nice cold plate, and then we're going to put it inside our refrigerator for 3 to 6 hours, or overnight if you want to continue the recipe for the next day. The next thing you want to do is the juices that we're making in the bottom of the pan, you want to drain those juices off into a glass dish, okay, like I did yesterday. And when we pull this out of the oven, this is what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with what's called the gravy for the beef. And the gravy for the beef is where all the flavor of the beef is going to come from when we dip the beef, okay? So, now that we have our gravy from yesterday, I'm going to show you what the beef looks like. Now, I told you there were 2 important secrets to making this recipe. Well, the first important secret to this recipe is the gravy. But the second most important secret to this recipe is how thinly you can slice the beef. Okay? So this is our beef that we've made. And you can see that I've sliced it thinly. Okay? Now there's a reason for this. And I will show you, I will explain that to you when we're almost done here. Now, it's a little bit difficult to slice such a beautiful, evenly sliced piece of beef. Now, there's a little secret that I did. I have a wonderful woman who runs the store in the foot of my building, and she happens to have a meat slicer. So this morning before the show, I went down to see her and asked her if she would be kind enough to slice up my beef for me, okay? And as with everyone here, I'm sure that right down the street from you, you have a local butcher or a local store that you can take your beef into, okay, that you've prepared, pre-prepared, and ask them to slice it for you. The reason why I would tell you to do this is because when you try to slice the beef with a large bladed knife, it's going to be hard from sitting in the refrigerator for such a long time that it's going to be you're going to be cutting into the beef. Well, you don't want to cut into the beef. That's not this recipe. You want the beef to be perfectly flat, every piece perfectly even, okay? And you'll be able to see how this is going to cook up in the beef in just a few moments. So, this is our gravy that we've set aside from our oven. And we're going to take our gravy and we're going to put it on a pot and we're going to simmer up this beef. So, how we do this? We're going to take our gravy and we're going to pour it right into the pot here. Okay? Now, depending on the type of beef that you use, when this gravy cools in the refrigerator overnight, you might get a skimming of fat on the top. Do not remove this. This is what condenses down and makes your gravy rich when you're going to do your beef. So, all we need to do is to take our gravy that we pre-prepared and simmer it. I'm going to bring it up to a fast simmer. Simmer it on the stove, and we're going to add our beef to the gravy. Okay? Now, I'm going to set our beef aside a moment until this starts simmering. And we're going to put our potato salad together. Okay, so here's our potato salad. So, with our potatoes, which are nice and cool, remember, don't try and do this while they're still hot, okay? We're going to take our hard-boiled eggs and throw them in there. We're going to take our selino, our celery, put it in there. And I'm not leaving any celery. I love my celery. And we're going to take our olives, okay? Now this is the fun part. We need mayonnaise and mustard, okay, as our binder. And I need to get a spoon here for mixing. And I need another spoon for taking my mayonnaise and my mustard. Now you can use any kind of mayonnaise, okay? You can use low-fat, non-salted, whatever kind of mayonnaise you like. I personally like the brands that I find here. I haven't found any brands that are unusual or don't have a really good consistency here in Albania, so most of them are pretty good. So I'm going to take 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and I'm going to take maybe a half, maybe a little bit more. I'll just kind of sneak it in there. Let's say we're going to use 2.5 tablespoons of mayonnaise. Okay? And, oh, I need that. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put about 1 tablespoon of mustard. There we go, okay? About 1 tablespoon of mustard. Now, seasoning is simple. It's just salt and pepper. Now, if I didn't have fresh celery in the house, and I didn't have time to go run down the street and grab some, or if I couldn't find it that day, I would use celery powder or a celery seed. Both easy to find here in Albania. Almost all the stores carry them. So I'm going to put a little bit of pepper in here, okay? And I like a little bit more pepper than I do salt, because in Chicago and in the Midwestern United States, we love pepper. Okay. And I'm going to put just a pinch of salt. Just a pinch. That's all you need. Okay. And now we're going to mix. Now, you want to mix it. You don't want to break anything up, so you have to mix it incredibly slowly, okay? So this part of the process, you want to make sure that you're kind of turning it, folding the ingredients into one another. Now, depending on the size of your potatoes and depending on how much ingredients that you actually use, when it's kind of a by eye. It's going to be on your discretion whether if you want to add more mayonnaise or more mustard to your potato salad. Now, quite honestly, I think that what we're using right now for this particular portions, I think it looks perfect. Okay. Now, I'm going to take that and I'm going to spoon this into our serving dish here. Okay. Now, again, this is roughly, it may seem like a lot, but it's really not. This is for about the family of 4, okay? And if you're, like I said,